Hello, hello, folks. So listen, new revelations. Apparently, back in September 29, 2020, presidential debate, apparently Trump had tested positive for COVID-19 3 days prior on September 26th. First, he had a positive and then a negative, but then the negative was just for antibodies. So, it's a little tricky how they presented it. And so, anyways, how this came about was Mark Meadows has a new book coming out. Well, Trump's furious. He calls it fake news. And then Mark Meadows goes on national television and says, yeah, it's fake news. But here's the thing, folks. Now, the January 6th Insurrection Committee subpoenaed Mark Meadows. He's claiming executive privilege because Trump's claiming executive privilege. And I know it's a tricky one. It's a lot better. We're not constitutional lawyers. So, but here's the thing. In his book, he makes revelations about things that happened at the White House. But yet, he won't testify for this January 6th committee. He's stonewalling them. So, these guys will play the game. It's just all about politics. It's too bad that it's only for position and power and not for the overall good of the American society. That's what irks me more than anything else. And John Bolton was the same in Congress. He wouldn't testify, but yet he had this book with all these revelations in it, waiting for his book to come out first. So it's all about profits and power and not about service to the American people, it seems. So let's look at a video. This was December 1, 2021. And this one is, what is it, MSNBC? So it doesn't matter where it's coming from. As long as the information here is factual, that's all that matters. That's all we're interested in. So let's see what this gentleman here has to say. Any questions, comments? Post in chat or comments below, please.
Donald Trump is a textbook narcissist, no regard for anybody but himself, always has been. Today, we've learned that the depths of his selfishness and disregard for others were even deeper than previously known. According to an upcoming book by none other than Trump's own White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, then President Trump initially tested positive for COVID on September 26th of last year. That is nearly a week before he publicly disclosed his condition. According to Meadows, Trump subsequently tested negative on the 26th, right after the positive result, so they decided to dismiss the positive result as a mistake. Okay, we got one negative, we got one positive. Just wing it, I guess. Did the leader of the free world, do the responsible thing? Did he quarantine out of abundance of caution? Did he use the amazing resources of the most powerful government on earth to just suss out what was really the case? Was he positive or negative? No, of course not. Here's everything Donald Trump did do shortly before and after he tested positive for a highly contagious virus before life-saving vaccines were available. On the day of the 26th, right before Trump tested positive, he held that infamous celebration for his new Supreme Court nominee, Amy Coney Barrett. It's a big pro-life party in there, inside and without masks or social distancing. See Chris Christie in the background of that photo? He's going to be in the ICU pretty soon. Trump, who was in the middle of a heated campaign season, then tested positive after that event, okay? Now, just put yourself in the situation of doing that. You just saw some friends and you test positive. Probably reach out and let them know that you just tested positive for COVID. That does not appear to have happened. So he tests positive for that event. It's before a scheduled rally in Pennsylvania, a rally which, as you can see from the footage we are showing, he did not cancel. The next day, get this, oh, it gets better. September 27th, Trump meets with Gold Star families at the White House. Those, of course, families of fallen soldiers, surviving members of.
So remember, this is on September 27, meeting with these Gold Star families. This is a day after he had a positive test. One day after a positive test.
U.S. surviving family members of U.S. service members who were given their life and who are mourning their deaths. And he meets with them having tested positive, again, without masks or social distancing. Look how close they are. The day after that, September 28th, Trump held 2 outdoor events, one of which, ironically, was on the subject of COVID testing. Now, that event struck people as pretty odd at the time. Look at that visual. Trump spoke notably distanced from the other attendees. Have you ever seen Mike Pence stand that far away from the guy? Seriously. At the event, Trump made this crack to then COVID testing czar.
I would like to ask Admiral Giroir to come up and demonstrate how these tests are performed. He'll do this very nicely, I think. Good luck. Hope you don't test positive.
A joke, but not really. Practically, Trump's entire inner circle eventually tested positive for the virus, including Chris Christie, who was hospitalized, a serious case, who got very, very good medical care, which is good for him, and I'm glad he did. That wasn't true for everyone who got the virus and died. Christie says that Trump actually called him while he was in the hospital.
Then he said to me, "How do you think you got it?" Now, I've been in a room with him for 4 days before that. There were 7 of us, and 6 of us had gotten it. So I'm like, "Well, I'm pretty sure I got it in the White House, Mr. President." I think so. And he said, yeah, I'm sure. He goes, "But you're not going to say you got it from me, are you?"
That's what was on Donald Trump's mind. Knowing he had tested positive just days before, Trump still traveled to Ohio to be in the room for the first debate with then candidate Joe Biden. We later learned Trump was not tested before that in-person event without masks, with the septuagenarian on the stage who was also his opponent, who could have gotten COVID and died. That was happening a lot. It's been happening a lot to 70-plus-year-old unvaccinated people, as Joe Biden was at that point. And in his book, Mark Meadows now admits Trump had been looking physically unwell. Over the next 2 days, September 30th and October 1st, Trump held multiple campaign events and fundraisers in multiple states, including a fundraiser in New Jersey, where Trump spoke maskless to about 200 also maskless supporters. That night, the world first learned Trump's close aide, Hope Hicks, tested positive. Trump himself then got a second positive test shortly after, something he lied about in an interview with Sean Hannity.
So whether we quarantine or whether we have it, I don't know. You know, it's very hard when you're with soldiers, when you're with airmen, when you're with the Marines, and the police officers. I'm with them so much, and when they come over to you, it's very hard to say, "Stay back, stay back." You know, it's a tough kind of a situation. It's a terrible thing. So I just went for a test, and we'll see what happens. I mean, who knows?
He knew at that point he had tested positive a second time. He knew he had tested positive before he did the event with the soldiers and the airmen and Marines. And the implication of that is that he got COVID from the COVID-infested service members who just couldn't stop themselves from hugging the president. So bear with me. Trump found out he tested positive on the 26th of September, again, right before that interview. And he still told Hannity he did not know if he had COVID. He also took the time to blame the military and police for potentially getting him sick. Trump was hospitalized shortly after that, only to recover, thanks in part to the state-of-the-art treatments and care he had access to as a president. That was not made available to the hundreds of thousands of Americans who died horrible deaths under his watch. And we should note that Trump has called the fact that he tested positive before the debate fake news, because of course he has. And I guess all this is not really surprising, though enraging. The man is incapable at an almost cellular level. It's extraordinary of ever considering anyone else's welfare. Case in point, just hours after that first positive test, he walked to the back of Air Force One.
Okay, quick point there. So, September 26th, he tests positive. September 29, he has that debate with Joe Biden. October 2, he gets airlifted from the White House via helicopter to Walter Reed Hospital. Now, normally, COVID takes 5 to 8 days before you start seeing symptoms. So, October 2, he was in such rough shape, he had to be airlifted from the White House to Walter Reed Memorial.
Pretty tight quarters without a mask, and talked to reporters, at least one of whom then subsequently tested positive himself days later. That reporter's take on this revelation next.
Okay, so we're going to move to the next video, folks, in the queue. So the headline here, and this is from today, I guess the Today Show. Trump faces fallout. This was on December 2, 2021. Trump faces fallout after Mark Meadows makes explosive COVID claims in new book. So let's see what happens here, folks.
Stunning revelations. Former President Trump tested positive for COVID-19 3 days before that contentious first debate with then candidate Joe Biden.
I don't wear masks like him. Every time you see him, he's got a mask.
The disclosure in a new book by Mr. Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and obtained by The Guardian, but not reviewed by NBC News. Meadows adds that Mr. Trump received a negative result from a separate test hours later. 3 sources familiar with the matter confirmed that timeline to NBC News, and 2 of those sources characterized the former president's initial test as a false positive because of that subsequent negative test, a point Meadows echoed overnight.
Well, the president's right. It's fake news.
How did it all unfold? September 26th, Mr. Trump presided over a Rose Garden ceremony to nominate Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court, and then that evening traveled to a rally in Pennsylvania when the positive test came in, sending shockwaves through the White House, according to The Guardian. In the days following, a busy public schedule, including a ceremony with Gold Star families and a COVID briefing, all before heading to that debate on Tuesday, September 29th. Then Friday, October 2nd, the bombshell. Mr. Trump announced he'd contracted COVID after receiving a positive test. On the exact same day, New York Times reporter Michael Shear tested positive for COVID after he'd traveled with the president aboard Air Force One on the day of the Pennsylvania rally. Bottom line, do you think you got COVID from former President Trump?
I can't be 100% sure. I was on that plane. We were talking to the president. He didn't have a mask on. It was pretty clear to me that the plane was where I got COVID.
Weeks later, and after the former president was out of the hospital, Savannah pressed Mr. Trump about when exactly he tested positive.
When did you last remember having a negative test?
Well, I test quite a bit, and I can tell you that before the debate, which I thought it was a very good debate, and I felt fantastically. I had no problem before.
Did you test the day of the debate?
I don't know. I don't even remember. I test all the time. But I can tell you this. After the debate, like I guess a day or so, I think it was Thursday evening, maybe even late Thursday evening, I tested positive. That's when I first found out.
Of course, the key exchange there. Mr. Trump said in a statement, the story of me having COVID prior to or during the first debate is, quote, fake news. But he did not address whether he had received a positive test before the first debate. Craig.
Our Chief White House Correspondent, Kristen Welker, there at the White House. Kristen, thank you.
The Teflon Don. That's what we call Big Donald, the Teflon Don. The Teflon Don. 2 impeachments, no other friggin' president like that. 2 impeachments. Unbelievable. Guy lies about everything. There's got to be something, some truth there somewhere. I just haven't seen it, but let's move to the next video. This is Anderson Cooper. I know a lot of people do not like Anderson Cooper, but that's irrelevant. All we want is the story, the facts, and that's all. Just the facts. So let's move to the next video. Comments below, please.
Former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows is trying to walk back some explosive claims he reportedly made in his new book about the former president's positive COVID test. Now, before we get to his denial, let's just take a look at the timeline because it's important. As was first reported in The Guardian, Meadows reveals in his soon-to-be-released memoir that the former president first tested positive for COVID September 26. That was 3 days before his first debate with then Vice President Joe Biden. Meadows and the former president are now pointing out that he tested negative after testing positive. That same day, he hosted a White House event both in...
Okay, so there we go. September 26th, he tests positive and negative. Now, Maggie Haberman said the negative was for antibodies, which is not just to see if there's antibodies in there. So he had tested positive, and apparently that negative, according to Maggie Haberman, that was just a negative for antibodies in the body itself, the etheric body, so, or the corporeal body, however you want to refer to it. Let's go back to Anderson. Take it away, Anderson.
Inside and outside for then Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett. At least 12 attendees later tested positive there. The next day, September 27th, he hosted an indoor White House reception for Gold Star families, followed by a maskless news conference in the White House briefing room. On September 29th, which was debate day, Meadows reports the former president was moving slower than usual, but, quote, nothing was going to stop him from going out there. On October 1st, the former president finally acknowledged that he had coronavirus, and on October 2nd, he was hospitalized. Now, yesterday, the former president called the reporting on the claim in Meadows' book that he tested positive on September 26 fake news. And just a few hours later, Meadows went on Newsmax and seemed to agree with his former boss.
I believe the president says it's fake news. What is the story here?
Well, the president's right. It's fake news. If you actually read the book, the context of it, that story outlined a false positive. Literally, he had a test, had 2 other tests after that showed that he didn't have COVID during the debate, and yet, the way that the media wants to spin it is certainly to be as negative about Donald Trump as they possibly.
Hold on. The media wants to spin it? Come on, Meadows. We're not all friggin' totally clued out. Like October 1, he tests positive for COVID. October 2, he's airlifted to Walter Reed. Serious problem now. And anybody that knows anything about COVID, all these symptoms show 5 to 8 days prior. So September 29 was the debate with Biden. So let's face it, right here on national television, Mark Meadows is just throwing out crap, just hoping some of it'll stick. Plus, he's used to it with the Trump administration. That's all they pretty much did. I'm sure there had to be some facts there somewhere. There had to be some good Republicans there somewhere. I just can't find them. So anyways, Mark, take it away, buddy.
That the former president tested negative after testing positive. What Meadows
Hit
didn't
the
say
wrong
there,
button,
that is
sorry.
Importantly in the book is that Meadows was telling everyone in the former president's immediate circle to treat him as if he was positive. Maybe Meadows left that part out of the interview he did with Newsmax because what our Gloria Borger is now learning about the former president's reaction to the revelation about his positive test. She joins us now, along with CNN medical analyst Dr. Lena Wen, author of the book Lifelines: A Doctor's Journey in the Fight for Public Health. So, Gloria, the former president is disputing what is reportedly in this book written by Meadows, and that's it. Meadows himself seems to agree. What more are you learning about the former president's reaction to all this?
So he agrees that what he wrote was fake news because we reported what's in the book badly, and of course that's not true. What I'm learning is that the former president, according to a source who's familiar with the president's thinking, is that the former president is furious about what is in the book and that he's angry with Mark Meadows. Now, I was told by one source that Meadows and the president have not had a close relationship, but other sources are telling other reporters at CNN that it is a relationship that's been fine because, don't forget, Mark Meadows is on the Trump train for 2024, but that the president is mad about the way Meadows characterized all of this in the book. So what I think we are witnessing on Newsmax is Mark Meadows trying to get back in the president's good graces and saying, yeah, blame it on the press. What I was trying to tell you is that all the president had was a false positive, and that's it, and move on.
But, Gloria, what's interesting about this is the White House then went out of their way, and the former president too, to avoid ever acknowledging when he got his first positive test for COVID. I mean, if you think back to that time, this was a question of could he have possibly been positive during the debate? And
Sure.
He would never come forward and say, yes, I tested positive on this date, days before. They didn't want to go there.
Yeah, and Meadows is also saying there were 3 tests. We think there were 2. We don't know about any kind of third test. We know that the debate required a negative test 72 hours.
Right, and the debate themselves, for some odd reason, did not test on that day right before the debate. I find that
Well, if you'll
inexplicable.
recall, we all noticed the president arrived late. There is an honor system. And, they obviously told the folks there, he had tested negative. And so he went on to the debate stage. It was, that was the situation. But, that's not in the excerpt of the book that The Guardian printed. And again, we haven't seen the book. That's not mentioned.
Dr. Wen, just in terms of the timeline of when the former president started showing symptoms and was taken to Walter Reed, does a positive test on September 26th, as the Meadows book reportedly says took place, does that make the most sense since he was hospitalized at Walter Reed on October 2nd?
Yes, because the previous timeline made no sense to those of us who've actually treated COVID patients. And that's because you don't go from 0 to 100 overnight. And so what we had heard was that October 1st was when former President Trump first started testing positive. He first started having symptoms. Then by the next day, he was so severely ill that he had low oxygen saturation. He had such severe shortness of breath that he had to be airlifted and go to the hospital and be in the ICU. When at that time, the clinical course for the variants that were dominant were that there were about 5 to 8 days between when you first start having your symptoms to when you start having shortness of breath. And so one day just made no sense. And so this is the reason why so many of us were asking at the time, when did he test positive? And also, when was his last negative test? By the way, there's one question that would actually, I think, help us to solve this issue of, did people really think that this was a false positive? Which is, when did President Trump actually get monoclonal antibodies? Because for someone his age, who's older, who has chronic medical illnesses, who's the president, if he tested positive and his medical team really believed he tested positive, they would have given him monoclonal antibodies on September 26th or shortly thereafter. We know that he got those antibodies, but we don't know when. And I think finding out that question will really help us to understand, did his medical team and the president think that he really had COVID?
Gloria, so The Guardian reported, as I mentioned, that in the book, Meadows says he told people in the former president's circle, he told people in the former president's, quote, immediate circle to treat him as if he was positive, end quote. Even after the negative test, which obviously doesn't seem to square with what Meadows is now saying, that, oh, no, he got a negative test or got 2 negative tests, and so he was totally fine. I mean, if he's telling people, treat this guy like he's positive, what does it say about the then First Family going maskless at the debate, and also, I mean, with Gold Star families, for goodness sakes?
Right. I mean, it's hard to parse here. I mean, first of all, who is in the president's inner circle? Isn't the family in the president's inner circle? And also, what does that mean about contact tracing?
Yeah, by the way,
Dr.
we're
Wen,
seeing pictures of the family sitting maskless at the
right,
debate, even though the Cleveland Clinic had asked everyone to be wearing masks.
wearing a mask. And you, Dr. Wen knows more about this than I do, but shouldn't you be doing contact tracing with people who were in immediate contact with the President of the United States? And I would presume that would mean his immediate family. So how to explain the fact that they would go maskless in a place that is actually asking people to wear masks if they knew that he had had even a false positive at a certain point?
Right.
Because from the moment he gets a false positive, when you start saying to people, okay, we have to figure out just who the president was in contact
You
with.
would if you were a decent human being or with any sense of shame. All the people sitting there who we just saw on camera, you know, the Eric Trump, Donnie Jr., the whole the whole Michigas there, they are shameless. And clearly, we're making a very particular point by going maskless. Dr. Wen, looking back on it now, I mean, in light of the claims in Meadows' book, should the former president or his family even have been at that debate? I mean, shouldn't they have been quarantining?
Absolutely. So, to be clear, anyone, I don't care if it's the president, former president, or anybody else, if you have symptoms and you have a positive test, you should not be going anywhere. You should be in isolation. Also, if you're a close contact, to Gloria's point, if you're a close contact, and certainly a family who live with him should be close contacts. If you are a close contact of somebody who tested positive, you should be in quarantine if you are unvaccinated, which they were at the time. You should not be going anywhere. And also, you should not be test shopping. You don't get a test, and then once it's positive and you don't like that, you take more tests until it becomes negative. That's not the way this should work.
Dr. Lena Wen, Gloria Borgia, I appreciate it. Thank you.
So there you go, folks. You know, there's nothing this guy says, Donald Trump, fake news. Everything's fake news. If it doesn't align with his narrative, it's fake news. Just like the fraudulent election. Nobody can prove it's fraudulent. A lot of court cases trying to prove it, but there was no facts to substantiate it, but still calling fraud. And then one of the insurrectionists was interviewed on TV the other night from, what is it, the Oath Keepers? Either the Oath Keepers or the Proud Boys, one or the other. But he said, fraudulent election. Trump got 81 million votes. Well, my next question is, what, there's only 81 million people total population in the United States? So if there's 360 million, 81's not a majority. That's a minority. So then this guy said, well, there's all sorts of evidence that there was fraud, but it's been suppressed. Give me a friggin' break. So bullshit. Don't believe it. Questions, comments, throw in chat below. Stay safe, stay healthy. Talk to you all soon. Ciao for now.